Hey, what's up? It's your girl Sequoia, Silicon Valley tech editor, and we are at Blacklist Digital in beautiful Hollywood, California, checking out some virtual reality today. And we are gonna meet up with director Alton Glass to see what he's been working on. Let's go. Hey, Alton. What are you doing?
Okay, hold on. Pause that. Hey.
How are you?
How are you?
Good.
Welcome.
What are you working on?
Well, right now we're in the HTC Vive here
Okay.
with VR developer Jason and Chris.
Hi, Jason. Hey, Chris.
Today, and we're just testing out some gaming and some having a little fun today.
Cool.
Pop in and get a little taste of
I would love to. Do I have brushes?
Yes, and you're gonna see a controller here and a controller here.
Oh, that's dope.
And you're gonna use your index finger to
That one?
pull the triggers
Okay.
to actually draw.
Oh my goodness. That's
Maybe
so
we
cool.
Start a new one. And you can kind of get in there and create some.
Yeah, so one controller is the actual palette. And
Okay.
you point the cursor at one. So you'll take this one
Uh-huh.
and point it at,
Ew.
Rotate it.
yeah, and should be able to see it. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome.
So there's also other colors that you can use. There's
Okay.
other brushes. A lot of artists like to actually create 3D sculpting because you can actually walk in the 3D
Oh, that's
space.
true.
So you can actually, and another thing is you can draw on the ground and look down at the items that you draw at.
Oh,
so you
my
can look at them
goodness.
from different angles.
That's so cool. That is so cool. What is this? Is that like on the ground?
Yeah, it could be like a. It's the shadow. Yeah, it's the shadow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, that is awesome. Oh, so it creates three-dimensional shadows as well.
Yeah, so you have your like 3D space. So if you wanted to make a tropical island in there, artwork-wise, you can do that as well.
That's so cool. Okay, let's see. And then how do I export this video?
So it'll automatically save it for you on the desktop. And
Okay.
you can actually go back and look at it, and you can share it online.
That is fascinating.
So
Interesting.
you're saving your art experience there. And
Okay.
also these files can be shared in sites called Sketchfab where people can actually download the experience and actually interact with it as well and add additional art to it.
I love this. So this is like a gamification component of virtual reality, but like what about real world experiences or narrative experiences? Like how do you utilize that with VR?
All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna queue up a scene in VR from the narrative VR short that we just shot called A Little Love. So go ahead and press play on that, and we'll cue that up for you, Sequoia.
Okay.
So you have full view, 360 in the whole room.
Oh my goodness. So this is super interesting. Can I walk around or how does
You
this?
can look up, down, look
Okay.
up, and you have full view of the room.
Ah, that's so freaky because there's like no feet.
So now you know you're like a presence in the room.
So I'm like a part of the party. I like this.
There you go.
I think that's really interesting because that's an interesting way to interact with the actual characters. Having the person who's immersed in the environment interacting with the characters seems really cool. Is that something you've thought about doing?
Well, you know, as VR continues to develop, they're going to be creating more ways
Yeah,
to
look,
be
he looked at me.
interactive.
The little boy just looked at me. So how exactly is this made?
So basically, when you're shooting, narrative content, we decided to use, various different types of cameras because we had different parts of the story that required different tools. So we shot this on a combination of different cameras. One was called the Nokia Ozo.
Okay.
And we also we wanted to get the characters really close and do some animation, in 3D animation. So we also used a red weapon camera, and we use a process called nodal, which is kind of like shooting panoramics.
Okay.
So we can get the characters like extremely close to the camera. And that's sort of a surprise that you have to see when you watch the narrative short film.
I'm excited.
All right.
Is there a sample or example of what the camera looks like?
Yeah, so what I'll do is we'll close this out here, and we'll take you over to actually meet Tim's, the owner of Blacklist Digital.
Oh,
and
perfect.
You can see some of the camera and some of the tools that we use and follow up with the post-production process.
Awesome.
All right, so hey, Tim's. So I want to introduce you to Sequoia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So we got her into the HTC Vive, showed her some content, and now she wants to kind of know about how we capture it and how we post it.
Cool.
So I wanted you to kind of show her some of the tools we use.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is an example of a VR camera.
Interesting.
Most 360 cameras are combining multiple cameras to form one image.
Okay.
So typically there'll be different style cameras with a fisheye lens.
Okay.
And so each direction is photographed, and then in post, we stitch them all together to create the 360 video that goes in the headset you just saw.
So how many different types of 360 cameras are there?
There's a lot. So on the market now, there can be cameras up to 14 cameras, all the way down to a basic configuration like this that has 4.
Okay.
And sometimes you have a facing up camera, sometimes you don't. It just depends. And then there's a couple of techniques where you can use a single camera and shoot each direction and then stitch that together.
That's the nodal process we were talking about.
Okay.
With the red camera we used that they stitched here together. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And how long have you been working with 360 cameras?
For about 3 years, we've been playing with different configurations. We custom built a lot of stuff specifically for shows.
Okay. And then you're doing the post for Alton's film?
Yeah, so pretty much we've been doing, I started doing all my narrative film production and camera rentals and support and post here.
Okay.
And then they segued into VR.
Okay.
And then now we continue to expand that relationship into the VR production rentals and the post-production aspect. So now they're stitching it all together for me, color correction, the whole nine. So it's making it a seamless process.
Cool. So this seems really interesting to me. I'd love to see what you guys do in post to make this all work.
Absolutely. Let's go to the theater.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, so cool. Is this where post happens?
So yeah, this is the final stage where we put it up in the theater. We do color correction in here. So this room is where you would come in and look at the color correction, and we'd work with a colorist to set the mood and look. The heavy lifting happens on workstations, and that's where we actually assemble all of the footage and do the stitching.
Okay. And so when the colorist comes in, are they actually coloring in VR? Or like the actual stitching is already done, or when do they?
Yeah, so basically you do your stitching first. So from onset, you make your dailies, and then you go to editorial. So it's kind of like a classic editorial where you're working with a single string out, and you do your editing, and then we come into final stitching. Final stitching, we end here. And that's when you set the final look and color. And then sometimes it'll actually go back into VFX, and then we'll add the VFX. So here in this facility, we work very closely with the VFX department and the color department.
So then traditionally, it's the same process.
Yeah, it's the same. Like stitching is when VR first sort of kicked off, was like the hard part. People had to sort of wrap their head around. And now, they make different programs and they have things down now, like they use Nuke. It's a much faster, more robust system. But stitching essentially is just taking all of the cameras, like he was talking about the multiple cameras. It could be 8, it could be 6, it could be 20.
Okay.
And they stitch them all together and seam them together. So that way, when you look around, they're all blended together.
Right.
And there's nothing missing in the seams.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time that footage arrives here, it's already stitched together, and then your telesending artist is coloring.
Then
the
it goes
footage.
back to the traditional filmmaking,
Okay.
editorial style.
Okay.
You ingest it, pull it up, color it like you would anything else, do any visual effects and so forth.
Got
So
it.
that's what I like about VR. At first it's kind of like, oh wow, I got to go through this whole new learning curve, which you do, but as they walk me through it, especially get into the narrative side, there's a lot more that goes on, and then the sound as well, which is a very big deal, which you can kind of talk about too.
Yeah, I think one of the most overwhelming things for new filmmakers is the amount of data that's coming off these cameras and the organization of it. So you really have to make sure you have everything planned. Sometimes you have 6 cameras, 8 cameras. We have 14 cameras on some of the stereo shoots. So you have 14 cameras shooting, and if you have multiple cameras, it just kind of multiplies from there. So getting a handle on the dailies, organization of files, and storage is first. And then you move into editorial, and this is more traditional, where you actually see it in a timeline, and you can actually set up programs like Premiere to see through the goggles while you're editing. That's really helpful now. Like when we first started with VR, you couldn't do that. So now it's a lot simpler.
That's awesome. So where do you guys see VR going in the future?
You know, when I first got into it, it was actually, I was here, and at first it was just like, oh, this is cool. But, you know, actually having that experience and being that immersive experience just kind of opens you up as a filmmaker. And you say, wow, this is a new challenge. So I think what's intriguing is it's a new challenge. And it also, there are no rules. So you're building the car as you drive the car, you know, and I think that a lot of filmmakers and a lot of creators, they're coming up with new ways to just engage the audience. And I think it's helping, the industry in a way, because people ultimately want to go back to telling stories, regardless of what happens, whether it's a gimmick, like people thought 3D was just a gimmick, but I think, 3D TVs rather, but now I see VR and AR as it expands as being something that will continue to grow and have various different applications, that you can use. They're using VR content, to help people with phobias. So now you have a person that was once directing commercials, now they're directing content that people can watch to get over phobia. So there's so many different uses. And then you got brands that are doing it. So you're doing commercials, you're doing activations. And documentary, I think, is a great way to immerse somebody and take someone who couldn't go to a place, somewhere, and let them experience a documentary. And
Right.
The narrative space is always a wonderful challenge because you're pushing yourself, like you said, when you got into the HTC5 and you watch some of the content, you felt like everybody was looking at you.
Exactly.
So that's a whole new experience in itself.
Yeah.
And filmmakers will continue to, push themselves to figure, oh wow, how can I, develop the grammar and the language like they did with traditional film for 100 years. And I think it'll continue to grow.
How do you see the audience adapting? Like, do you see, because I know that was like a one-to-one experience with myself being in there. Do you see them sitting in a theater like this and having a similar experience?
Yeah, I think even when you go into a movie theater, you may be sitting next to someone, but that's still your story. You connect to a movie as if it's your story. You're sitting there, it's dark, and it's all about you and what's going on the screen. And yes, it may be a little closed off if you put goggles on, but I think that as we continue to grow and create, they're coming out with headsets now that don't always keep you enclosed. They have HoloLens, and they have you can name some of the other ones.
Yeah, as it expands, it's not going to be a closed headset. We're going to actually start seeing other people's avatars in there.
Oh, okay.
So in your own home, you're going to put on a headset, and then you guys are going to show up as avatars, and we're going to have this conversation. We're all going to be in different parts of the world. So it really opens, like when you get into AR and VR and the crossover, it's limitless. You can start to see like training applications where you get to take apart an engine before you actually go to service it. Teleconferencing is going to be huge in VR as soon as we have the technology to map people into the environment. So you could be in your living room and all of a sudden your friend appears on your couch and they're sitting on your couch and it looks like they're there.
That's awesome.
We're going to start seeing things like that. It's really exciting.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Tim's, for having us.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Alton, for sharing your film with us. And Jason, thank you for walking us through the experience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.